Hello again. My presentation is about the role of an institution in a region where the concept of crowdfunding is not really understood in the whole concept. Crowdfunding is in the air, as for many of you. Everybody speaks about crowdfunding. There are some articles, there are some reading studies, etc. But in the practical terms, the companies or the potential investors of crowdfunding are not really aware of the possibilities and the definitions, and there's not a clear framework about that. So my practice here is about this first step of an organization who is really, who has the missions to really make easy the access to finance for SMEs, who, as explained to you when you were in Asturias, the bridge was the image that really defines our role about access to finance, being a bridge between SMEs and funding entities. And when we were in Asturias, I speak about private and public entities, but I didn't mention the crowdfunding platforms as one of the financial partners we can have for this good practice. Now is the moment to clarify our role about this. So about the definition of crowdfunding, thanks to all the partners who really have clarified the definition and the different roles and the different purposes of different platforms regarding, it's true that the crowd needs to be involved to be crowdfunding, but the way of providing this funding is different. We can speak about a model of donations, we can speak about a model of crowdlending, or even the equity. So, as explained to you, as our role is a bridge, our role for this pilot initiative was two sides direction also. Help SMEs to understand the concept of crowdfunding and the obligations and all the duties about the process of crowdfunding, but also help funding entities, in this case the crowdfunding entities, in order to understand really how to really communicate better the role and how to communicate the focus of the different platforms. So in our case, and trying to facilitate the role and the access to finance for those SMEs, we see the crowdfunding real near this image of the business angel. And as Leonard explained, it's true that when you access to crowdfunding, you can be in the really startup phase of the company, even you are not a startup when you start to think about crowdfunding, but it's true that you need to be a company when you put your project into the platform. So this is this really early stage and this initial of the companies when the crowdfunding really access. It's true that this is not only, this is not very strict, because you can also access to crowdfunding when accessing the other stages of the company, for example, for growth, to launch a diversification and product or a new services, but it's true that normally is used in this phase of the companies. So when I speak about the crowdfunding, as I mentioned before, yeah, crowdfunding is in the air, but nobody was really aware of the clear definition and the clear actions and the clear objectives of the crowdfunding. So when thinking on these pilot actions, we have this in mind. So these pilot initiatives needed to have a kind of awareness effect to position even ourselves as the reference entity in crowdfunding at regional level, which was also our purposes. Of course, as in the framework of another global services, our purpose was also to improve the investment readiness and the financial planning of the companies wishing to access the crowdfunding platforms. And our idea was also to help those companies to really identify the good platform for their project or good platform for their initial project. So this was the idea. So to start from the beginning, we really needed to make a first analysis on the crowdfunding world at national level in our case. As you mentioned, one of the most known platforms are international, Kickstarter or Indiegogo. For Kickstarter, there were some, conditions to access to Kickstarters to create the company in the States or in UK. So we prefer at that moment to really forget about Kickstarter and just concentrate in national platforms. And then, when designing of the action, we really had to think on those ideas of involving some pre-steps of the action and post-steps for the action. So making a kind of pre-analysis of companies wishing to access to crowdfunding, and after the event, after the action, try to think on those monitoring phases also. So if we think at national level, in Spain there was a lot of platforms who have emerged for the last months. Let me say also that probably this is going to change, because the national government has put a draft of legislation in order to really be more strict for crowdfunding. So I think that we are now in the process of, really validation of those platforms, and I think that only the real ones, only the good focused ones are going to survive to this process. But as you mentioned, all these national platforms have different purposes, from donation to really equity, and they make all the steps. And they were different names managed by different private or even private-public platforms. And at the beginning, what we made was the analysis of the platform. Then we select one platform for each of the objectives. We select Lanzanos, which is, I think, the more known platform at national level, which is for projects, for creativity projects, for fund support, let's say donations scheme. But Lanzanos has another very good partnership with SeedQuick, which is more, it's not really a crowd lending, but has some elements of crowd lending and even some elements from equity. Arboribus is a pure crowd lending platform. And finally, the Crowd Angel is really crowdfunding based on equity. It's more for tech companies. So we select, let's say, one platform for each of the purposes. And then design the action. The action was clear that it was something physical, not really virtual, but an event. An event who has two main parts. The big part of the event is open to every public. As I mentioned, we had this ambition of being, the reference of crowdfunding at regional level. So this public part was one of the requirements for this. And this public part has also the purpose of being didactic, so educational, about the role, about the different platforms, not only for SMEs, but for different stakeholders, at policymakers or some other regional, social and economic agents. Finally, the event has a second part, which is a private part. It's a matchmaking between SMEs interested in crowdfunding and the 6 platforms I mentioned before. So managing those aspects, we cover really all the needs of purposes of that event. So we have 6 platforms involved at that time. It's as I mentioned, with different purposes. We really select 25 applications of SMEs to be part of the private part, so the bilateral meetings between those SMEs as the platform. We had 56 face-to-face interviews between these SMEs and the platforms, and 120 assistants for the public part. It was a very big event with a lot of people involved. Even we had some streaming visitants for the event, which finally it's a clear aspect on how crowdfunding is interesting for different initiatives at regional level. At that moment, we selected also one business project who has uploaded a project to one of the platforms, and the first part of the event was this explanation of a company explaining how was the process to access to the platform and etc. The company has a project in Kickstarter, because Kickstarter, you know, is the reference for everybody, and we really like to be Kickstarter present in a way or another in the event, but the project failed in Kickstarter. So it was, you know, a kind of good example for really explain people that to access to crowdfunding you need to have a strategy, a PR, activities, etc. in order to be successful, at least when accessing Kickstarter. So the profile of the people who presented projects to the platform, as you can see here, more of them were creative, let's say that presenting project from the creative point of view relating to developing of books, developing of some arts and some cultural and creativity projects. And the rest, even if they are classified under several sectors as tourism, services, industrial or e-commerce, has one thing in common, that all the projects were innovative in a way. Even if they approach a more traditional activity like tourism, they detected this relationship between innovation and crowdfunding, which I think is essential to understand the concept of crowdfunding. So, as I mentioned before, the idea was to position ourselves as a kind of reference point for crowdfunding and to help the companies to access to crowdfunding platform in the best conditions possible. So we follow with them all the process we follow with the companies involved in, say, Financia, which is the name of our process. So making this pre-feasibility analysis, making a kind of assessment, project or action plan. So we also advise on combining different sources of funding, not only crowdfunding, if not necessary, combining with public or private. And for the common service of venture investment competition, which is the joint service offered to a group of companies, not individual one, but for a group of companies, we develop in this way. We develop after the event. We had no time to really organize before, and it's nice to see that even if those 25 companies were interested, submitting good applications to be to crowdfunding, they had no idea at all on the information they really need, the calculation they really need to upload a project in the platform. So if you, my advice here is really to concentrate in this pre-phase for SMEs in order to help them not to fail when uploaded a project, making calculation for rewards, making calculation for fiscal purposes, trying to really arrive to a coherent figure for the project is something essential in order to have a good service about crowdfunding. So when selected all the source, let me see you that this is a kind of first step for one region who really likes to go in deep in crowdfunding. Hopefully this is the first step, and I see Leonard projects as, you know, second, third step, hopefully, to arrive to a crowdfunding. Here, what I am speaking is about using the current platforms you have at your regional or at your national level, and trying for you to make this pilot action, because for us it was also the first time to really approach the crowdfunding from an advisor's point of view. So it's really nice to start by something which is relatively easy to acquire, relatively progress actions. And as regard the strengths, I would like to say also that regarding your relation with platforms, it's something fantastic to arrive to face-to-face meetings with those platforms, because, you know, web information or Other information you can find about these platforms in forums, etc. Internet here is the main source of information. Is not really clear at all. When you speak with those people who has the managerial part of the platforms, then you understand really the focus of the platform, and you really understand how to help your SMEs to arrive to those platforms. It is also useful to, as I mentioned before, in Spain there's a lot of initiatives about this, and not only the initiatives are really pure crowdfunding. Let me say you that, at least in our country, there are some initiatives which are really more focusing consultancy, and then the crowdfunding is just an element to attraction from those companies, and you really need to be aware of those situations in order to really provide advice for your companies. And as weaknesses is the changing regulation, of course. As I mentioned, in Spain there's a kind of draft of the regional, of the national government. It's not clear at all what is the purpose of the national government for this draft, because on a way they pretend to offer more secure for the investor, which is something nice, regulating some things about the position of the platforms, ensuring frameworks, etc. But on the other hand, they have limited the amount of money that a people can invest in crowdfunding platforms. So it's not clear at all if the national legislation is serving just to limiting the risk of those activities, or let me say a kind of lobby from the banks or private other investors in order to really stop the growth of the platform. But in any case, we will see in the next weeks how the proposal is modified or amended, and maybe in some months the framework regulation is more clear in Spain. Let me show you just one video about this day.
El Centro Europeo de Empresas e Innovación de Asturias participa como socio dentro de un proyecto europeo que es el proyecto DIFASS. Este proyecto está financiado por fondos FEDER y su objetivo es facilitar el acceso de financiación a las pequeñas y medianas empresas. Esto cuadra perfectamente con una de las actividades principales del CEEI, que es precisamente esa, ayudar a las pymes a acceder a la financiación para sus proyectos. Debido probablemente a la dificultad con la que se encuentran los emprendedores de acceder a fuentes de financiación más tradicionales, como puede ser la financiación bancaria o otro tipo de las subvenciones, ¿no? Por ejemplo, que también cada vez son menos, pues surgen nuevos modelos, aparte de la inversión de posibles inversores privados, que sería otra fórmula, pues está el modelo de la financiación en masa, donde todo el mundo puede participar y todo el mundo puede invertir en aquello que le gusta o que le dice algo.
No hemos venido a sustituir a los bancos ni a las vías de financiación tradicionales, sino que venimos a ser una alternativa en la que una persona ayuda a otra persona. Es así de simple. Persona que tiene idea, persona interesada en apoyar esa idea económicamente. Por eso triunfa, porque no hay tercero, no hay letra pequeña.
Lo que se trata es de traer esas plataformas aquí, que les expliquen cómo funcionan, que venga también, que van a venir gente que a través de esas plataformas ha obtenido su financiación, y por lo tanto es una ayuda que queremos desde el Principado prestar para buscar financiación a los emprendedores.
Hemos conseguido sacar un proyecto en Kickstarter, que es la mayor plataforma de crowdfunding del mundo, al menos por volumen de proyectos financiados. No conseguimos el éxito, pero aprendimos unas cuantas lecciones por el camino.
La jornada sobre crowdfunding que hemos organizado en el día de hoy se divide en dos partes. En una primera parte hemos podido conocer a 6 de las plataformas de crowdfunding más destacadas a nivel nacional, y además hemos procurado que estas plataformas sean distintas entre sí. Hay unas plataformas más dirigidas a proyectos sociales y culturales, otras más dirigidas a proyectos empresariales y otras dirigidas incluso a ofrecer préstamos, el crowdlending.
Lánzanos está pensada para proyectos cuyo sistema de recompensas está basado en productos físicos, es decir, tú tienes un proyecto musical, a cambio evidentemente vas a dar el disco o las entradas para tu concierto. SeedQuick es para empresas o proyectos de gran envergadura que lo que pretenden es dar a cambio una rentabilidad económica.
Nosotros trabajamos con muy pocos proyectos a la vez porque intentamos colaborar con ellos para convertir su actividad, que normalmente es de interés individual, en interés del emprendedor en poner su proyecto en marcha, convertirlo en una actividad de interés colectivo. Un interés que se acerque al colectivo al que le quieren pedir la financiación para poner su proyecto en marcha.
Nosotros creemos que la apuesta por abrir las IFAs del proyecto pasa por compartir conocimiento, metodología, infraestructuras, manuales, tutoriales, todo lo que has generado en la ejecución del proyecto que le puedes ofrecer a la comunidad que te ha apoyado, ¿no?
Que no somos ni 100% crowdfunding, ni 100% un fondo de capital riesgo, estamos allá en medio y nos aprovechamos de la viralidad del crowdfunding y el poder invertir con pequeñas cantidades, pero luego todos los procesos que seguimos son como los del capital riesgo, en cuanto a analizar las empresas, valorarlas, una vez invertidas el seguimiento.
En una segunda parte hemos podido conocer 25 iniciativas empresariales con interés en acceder a este tipo de financiación vía crowdfunding. Cada proyecto disponía de 3 minutos para contarnos su experiencia y poder contactar con estas plataformas. Por último, la última parte de la jornada y como broche final, pues hemos organizado entrevistas individuales entre los proyectos y las plataformas, de modo que al menos pues cada uno de los proyectos, de los 25 proyectos que han presentado, pueda reunirse con 2 o incluso algunos con 3 plataformas para contrastar si su proyecto encaja. La acogida de la jornada, la verdad es que ha sido espectacular. Sabíamos que en Asturias mucha gente quería saber lo que es el crowdfunding y quería conocer las plataformas, pero bueno, no pensábamos que iba a haber tanta afluencia de gente y tantos proyectos interesados en conocer las plataformas. Así que bueno, estamos muy contentos del resultado final de la jornada.
I think this is an example of a simple action that any of you can make at your level, regional or national level, and I think it can be the first step towards a more in-depth strategy regarding crowdfunding that hopefully can have a known platform to develop some investment from the part of business angels, etc., or several community that can be managed for any of you. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, well, I'm here to answer.